The Callisto Protocol, leading up to its release, it looked like it was everything that I ever wanted. A return for Glenn Schofield to a Dead Space-esque universe. A way to be able to get a new contender in the survival horror genre. But alas, when the game actually came out, it went from being my most anticipated game to my most disappointed one. Now, I found a lot of issues with the Callisto Protocol, which I documented in 2 separate videos I've made about this game. But with the chance to go back and witness the true ending of the game, to experience the final transmission, the one and only piece of story DLC, I'd hoped that I would finish the DLC and find a brand new appreciation for the Callisto Protocol, to see if Striking Distance had learned from their mistakes of the past, and they used that to create an experience where I'm craving for more. Unfortunately, after finishing the final transmission some 2 hours later, that's sadly not the case. Now, normally when it comes to my content, I script it. My thoughts all coalesced onto the page, but today, I'm just gonna rant about it. Now let's dive in. Now, for those of you who haven't played the Callisto Protocol to the end, this is going to have spoilers in it. So, if you want to avoid those, I'd suggest you skip the timestamp shown. So where does the final transmission begin? Well, the ending of the Callisto Protocol was in equal parts great and equal parts frustration. The great is that Jacob sacrifices himself to send Danny off on the last remaining life vessel. Excellent. However, it then cut to a moment where it showed a brief glimmer of hope for our main man Jacob, where Dr. Marla says there's a way for him off the space station, a way to survive. It was a total cliffhanger ending, and it sucked. The final transmission starts directly from that. You get a 3-minute video showcasing the events that happened over the Callisto Protocol, and then boom, you're in. The difference is, you're not standing where you last left Jacob. He's moved. He's now in the psych ward for some reason. And the game really doesn't give too much background as to why you're in a different location, or what's going on around you. All it states is that you've been through some trauma and things aren't quite what they seem. Anything okay. And so you just go off. And basically all that has to happen then is that you're tasked with finding data disks and finding Dr. Marla so that you can escape together. Now, let's just take a second to talk about Dr. Marla here. Dr. Marla in the base game of the Callisto Protocol is a scumbag. The worst type of human being you can ever imagine. The amount of horrors that she's inflicted on these poor, hapless inmates is beyond comprehension. And the events across this DLC show even more light on just how nefarious this character is. And yet, at the same time, it wants you to care about this character. It wants you to think like, oh yeah, I'm going to get off the planet with her. No! Like, this character is just a dick. Like, why would you care about them in any way, shape or form? Why would you want to get off with them? Surely, you're better off putting a bullet to their head, pulling out the riot shotgun, and just ending her there and then. She definitely doesn't deserve to be saved. No way in hell. The things that you get to see that she's done, the levels that she has gone to, is wild. Absolutely wild, and yet you're supposed to just go ahead with it. And anyway, this isn't even where it gets worse. It's not even where it gets worse. The thing is with this, right? You dive into this experience, and all of a sudden you've got this trauma. So it means that you're seeing hallucinations as you go on. Think of it the same way that Dead Space did hallucinations. It's like that, but done way worse, because it just feels really cliche, and it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The base game did have like these minor moments where these kind of hallucinations were happening, and there it didn't make sense either, because the actual infection itself, the biophage, doesn't cause hallucinations. So it was just one of those things where they thought, yeah, this would be cool to add in, let's just chuck it in. That kind of thing returns here with the same level of depth applied to it. And it's all things you've seen 100 times before in media ever since the original Dead Space, but it's just done worse. Enemies will appear and disappear, or you'll have the classic, which has appeared ever since PT did it really well, which is where you walk down a corridor and then, oh, whoop-de-doo, it's looping again. And you get that time after goddamn time. Does it add variety to the game? I guess you could say it's supposed to, but in reality it never does, because ultimately this DLC is exactly the same as the base game. There isn't really any differences whatsoever. You're still using the same melee combat, you've still got the same weapons, for the most part of the DLC, for at least 90 minutes of the 2-hour experience. And so it just feels like, oh, I'm just picking up directly where I left off. But the thing is with a DLC, especially a DLC releasing this late on, you'd have thought that the team at Striking Distance would have thought about the way to improve the experience. To provide something for the player whereby they've learned from mistakes of the past. Maybe they try something new, maybe they give loads of different abilities or loads of different enemy types that you've never had before, as a way to be able to stretch the franchise and see where it could move to in the future. But no, they didn't bother with any of that here. So if you're like me and you walked away from the Callisto Protocol not really a fan of it, thinking it was kind of a mid-experience rather than anything that would revolutionize your life, you're going to just come out of this with the same, if not worse, opinion. And the reason why it's worse, and I'm going to come in with a bombshell straight away here, is the ending. Now if you don't want to know this, skip ahead, but really if you are just on the fence about playing this, or you're watching this review to see if this is worth your time, you might want to see this, because if I had known this was the ending, I probably wouldn't have even bothered with this. The ending's a dream. Yeah. Well, to be clear, what it is, that somehow Jacob has lost all his limbs, and he's being kept alive on a medical machine, which is helping him transmit his data across to Danny, who is floating through space. Yeah. So everything you've seen, all these hallucinations, all this crazy stuff that's happened, is actually because you're dead, or pretty much dead. Yeah. So the potential chance we had for character growth, which the first game hinted at, with saying that Jacob was a guy who was only in it for himself, and now he's turning over a new leaf. We don't get to see any of that. We don't get to learn any more about Jacob's backstory. We don't get to learn any more about the Jupiter Corporation. We don't get to learn any more about the mysterious forces behind the scenes that have wanted to further human evolution. We get none of that whatsoever. And Dr. Mauler herself and her experiments that are shown across this, were they even real? Because now you kind of doubt that any of it did actually happen. So it is totally throwaway. There is no point for this. All this showed to me is that Striking Distance are done with the Callisto Protocol. There is no chance of getting a sequel. If there is, I guess it would have Danny as the lead protagonist. But really, what's the point? What do we need to know now? If everything's gone out and Danny's got it all, it's going to bring the end of everything anyway. So what's the point? This to me seems like Striking Distance just putting their hand up and furthering the distance between themselves and this. It's just such a damn shame. It's just one of the worst endings I've ever experienced in my life. One of those endings that just makes you really sour on the overall experience, and I wasn't really overly impressed with the experience anyway. And the reason for that is multi-pronged. The first, as I mentioned, is that the experience is essentially exactly the same as the base game. Now there's one new enemy which is introduced in this called the Bio-Robot, and all it is really is that it's just a bigger enemy with a slightly bigger health pool, because these enemies just do exactly the same as we've had throughout the entire main base game. They swipe 3 times, you dodge, 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 hit, 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 done. And that's it. Now the first time this enemy was introduced, it's supposed to get you to sneak around the environment, to show a bit of fear before you have to engage them eventually. But really, all that I did was just walk out and thought, right, let's see what this thing can do. And after several dodges, several hits, it was over. Now, I'm not playing this on some little namby-pamby difficulty. I was playing this on maximum security mode, which is the hardest difficulty available. Granted, I was playing this on my New Game Plus loadout, so I did have a load of different tools at my disposal. But even so, if your big bad enemy is designed to be a real challenge to the player, you can't just have it stick to the same rules that we've had for everything else. because the game and its melee combat system is fundamentally flawed. There was just no challenge to any combat in this entire experience because everything abides by the same rules. Now, in saying all this, later on into the experience, the robots do start to have an AoE attack, which can be frustrating. It just basically means you have to stop comboing them and move away for them to explode and then re-engage the combat. That's really all it is. And it does, I suppose, punish you for just mashing and just zoning out. And I did get punished by that quite a lot. Not because I found it overly challenging in any way, shape or form, but because I could not concentrate on this game. I was so bored throughout my entire playthrough of it for those 2 hours of just feeling like every single lesson they could have learned, they just have not. They've stuck to what made the Callisto Protocol. And due to that lack of concentration, that was my biggest enemy, not anything else the game threw at me. So I've already spoken about the one new enemy type that's included here. So what about a host of new weapons? Do you get flamethrowers? Do you get some cool ass future weaponry that could really reinvent how this game's combat could work? Short answer is no. You get one new weapon, which is a kinetic hammer, which was introduced about 90 minutes into the 2-hour experience. So for half hour extra, you get chance to play with this brand new tool. And what it is, it's a replacement for the stun baton. And it just does wild damage, like insane damage. Biophages which come up to you as normal get put to the bin. They get put to paste by this new weapon. And it is fun, splattering brains all over the environment as you mash R2 without a care in the world. And it also makes short work of the robots that you encounter. Now this hammer has 2 abilities. You've got a normal swing, which is with R2, just like with the stun baton before, but you also now get a brand new ability in the R1. The R1 does a charge move, which then you slam down in front of you for an AoE attack, which can handle hordes of enemies. Now due to this, it does mean that the game throws larger mobs than you've ever had before your way. But the thing is, with this charged R1, these mobs are essentially meaningless, because each charged attack just makes mincemeat of them. So it just makes you wonder, what's even the point? What's even the point of using anything other than this hammer for every single encounter? And well, there isn't. Now it would be nice if you could go back and take this hammer into the main base game to see how that would change how the combat encounters work. It would probably end up making the entire thing a cakewalk, but at least it'll give you a chance to go back and experience the base game again, whereas right now, there's no point whatsoever. With the introduction of this hammer coming in so late into the experience, it can't help but feel like it's just a retread of the main campaign. You got moments where you gotta sneak past a shed load of blind enemies as you stab and skulk around in the shadows. You got moments where you fight those invisible frog-like enemies, where they cling to surfaces and come at you with a vengeance in a pack. All those same kind of big set-piece moments from the main campaign are here in smaller form, and without the hammer being able to add that extra spice to these encounters, it does feel like you're just doing the same things over and over again. Now there is one area, and one area alone, where this game has shown an improvement, and that is in the puzzles. The main campaign didn't offer puzzle implementation in any way. Here in the final transmission, they've included 2 different types of puzzles. The first is a simple lock puzzle whereby you turn dials to be able to unlock a door or unlock an item, and they're really well implemented. The last time you end up doing one, they put it on a time limit with enemies trying to approach your position, and that extra bit of pressure does put the fear of God in you, as you nervously try different combinations and try and figure it out before the big bad guys come. The other style of the puzzles is a simple lever puzzle, whereby you pull levers in a specific order to be able to light them all up and move on your way. Now these ideas aren't revolutionary. You've seen them countless times across video gaming, but it did break up the action, and it added a nice bit of variety into what is a very familiar experience. And really, that's all there is to say about the final transmission. If you're a fan of the base game, there is something here for you. I think you'll walk away from it feeling like you've had a good little time. For anyone else, I would avoid this like the plague. The ending is the worst ending I've seen in modern video gaming in a goddamn long time, and the gameplay is still full of the same fundamental flaws that the base game always was. It's just here, you're in doing it all over again for seemingly no reason at all. If this DLC marks the end of the Callisto Protocol as a franchise, I'm not going to shed a tear. The game may have been stunning visually, but with so many compromises made to the gameplay, the sheer amount of time that you're having to go through ducts or crawl through small spaces to ensure the areas can load becomes mind-numbing. And I cannot wait to see Striking Distance try something new, to move away from this failed melee system and find a new way to entertain the player, because the Final Transmission doesn't do that. Now that is it for this rant, and to be honest, I found this really cathartic. I put the vote out to you guys whether or not you wanted a scripted or a rant style video over on my YouTube, and you voted for the rant. I hope it has delivered, I hope it's what you wanted. If you do want me to expand more on any of my thoughts, by all means, reach out to me in the comments section and I'll look forward to discussing it with you. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to put a like on it and subscribe to the channel for more survival horror content. Up next, I'll be ending the Dead Space series with Dead Space Remake. I look forward to seeing you back here soon. Thank you ever so much for your time. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. See ya.